Hello. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm going to put you on mute for just now, and then we'll open it up in just a moment, okay?
You're going to do what to me?
I'm muting you right now. But
okay. Okay.
But we can hear you loud and clear. That's good.
Great.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. This is Celeste Carmichael from Extension Administration and Program Development and Accountability. I want to welcome you to another session of Campus County Connections. Just a reminder that these webinars are offered once a month, and what we're trying to do is look for just great examples of things that are happening to connect research and extension, folks on campus and off campus doing the good work of Cornell Cooperative Extension. We often hear about Campus County Connections, and we just want to help you know about some of the things that are happening either within your program area or beyond your program area. So we're really happy that you were able to join us today. These webinars are just an hour in length and are really intended to just expand what you might know about what's happening out there, both in the field and on campus and collectively together. So we won't ask an awful lot of you. There's a couple of polls for interaction just to just to make sure that it's reaching your needs and we know who's out there. And just a reminder of what we're doing in Cornell Cooperative Extension in terms of campus and county and why we're doing that. It relates to our program definitions and standards for cooperative extension, our niche of our organization, and in order to really hit the sweet spot of what we want to be doing, we need to align what we're doing on campus and off campus. We need to partner with each other, and we need to be focused and grounded in a research base. So that's why we're here today, and we're really delighted that you could join us. And two very special guests could join us, and that's Mary Jo Dudley, the director of the Cornell Farm Worker Program, and Janice Degny, who works in dairy and field crops as a team leader and is located in Cortland County. So with that, I'm going to turn this right over to Mary Jo and to Janice. And if you guys could introduce yourselves first, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our program for today. All right, so let me unmute Janice. There we go. And I can pass on the mouse here to Mary Jo. Maybe. There we go. All right.
So this is Mary Jo Dudley. I'm the director of the Cornell Farm Worker Program. And for those of you who are not familiar with what our program is about, we have a very explicit mission to address the needs of farm workers and their families through research, education, and extension. And we consider these connections with the county as a critical piece to what we're doing. Janice?
Hi, this is Janice Degny. I'm a dairy and field crop team leader in South Central New York. And my role in this project was to help recruit farms for Mary Jo to have the roundtables with, and I attended one roundtable session with her.
No, that's okay.
So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today was this effort that was partially funded through Smith-Lever, which was to looking at workforce development, and in particular, it has evolved into looking at improving workplace relations. So part of what we wanted to do is we've been doing research on what are the approaches that can be put into place to maintain a skilled, satisfied labor force. And we started first with group meetings with farm workers to talk a little bit about how they got to their workplace, what they find successful in their workplace, things that they would like to change in their workplace. And then we separately met with farm owners and managers just to talk with them a little bit about the history of transitions in their labor force. What are some of the challenges they face now? What are the things that are working and the things that are not working? And the third piece of this is a joint consultation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But in so doing, one of the things that we wanted to bring to the fore was, what are some of the best practices that could be replicated on other farms?
Okay.
We found that this project is of great interest both to workers and employers, so it's a very nice fit. Currently, as many of you are familiar, farm owners are very concerned about what they can do to retain their workers, to attract new workers. And similarly, the workers who are here on farms are very uncertain about what their long-term employment options are, what are opportunities for them to advance in farm work. So this project was trying to bring together that area of mutual concern and interest. So as I said, in the interviews with the farm owners and managers, we talked about what the labor challenges are. Most of you are probably familiar that most of the farms have transitioned to a Hispanic workforce. So our research examines why farms transitioned to a Hispanic workforce, what were the different factors, how did that come about, and in the event of this transition, what are some of the pros and cons? What are some of the things that people feel are working, and what are some of the things that people feel are not working?
Okay, so at this point we're going to ask you to chat in, just get a little bit of interaction here, and if you can use the chat box, and I think you can, I don't know if you can adjust in, we're using the event tool within WebEx. As you know, you had to go to the event area, so I'm not sure if you can adjust it so that you can send your chat to everybody, but if you can do that, please do, just so everybody can see what you have to offer. But the question is, what do the farmers in your area identify as labor concerns? So if you can go ahead and just take a moment to enter that in to the chat box, that would be great. All right, so you're starting to get some responses here. I think I'm going to have to go back to this box so we can see them. All right, were the workers you interviewed an immigrant workforce? That's one question that's come in. And our only options are hosts and panelists. Okay, so sorry about that. Keep the labor that they have, finding skilled and reliable employees, reliability of employees. The biggest concern is the availability of dedicated workers, a shortage of workers, not enough skilled labor, and complications with immigration paperwork. Community integration, local labor is not available. And Mary Jo is writing all of these down. This is great. Thank you for participating here. Okay, looks like it's slowed down. Can you just read it again? Okay, I'm going to read it through one more time. Keeping the labor that they have, finding skilled and reliable employees, reliability of employees, availability of dedicated workers, there's a theme here, shortage of workers, not enough skilled labor, complications with immigration paperwork, local labor is not available, community integration. It is the case that there are local people who can work, but they don't want to work on farms. All right. So, do you want to go to the next slide, or you want to talk about that a little bit?
Let's talk a little bit about this, because I think these are some issues that certainly are important to this research and extension project. just as some background, most of the workers that we are convening in focus groups are immigrant workers, and because of the immigration concerns throughout the state, the first step to this research is that we actually do something which is called an emergency planning workshop. And what that is about is it speaks to issues that immigrants encounter. What are some of the things that immigrant workers should think about in advance of an emergency being a car accident, a farm accident, and immigration detention. So we go over very carefully some of the things that people can do in advance, and if they do have an emergency, how should they respond? We focus primarily on sharing this information with workers, but we also share it with farm owners. And there's a component with the farm owners that is critical to this topic, which is, does the farm have an emergency plan, and what does that consist of? So we typically will have the farm owner and the workers in the same room where we talk about what would happen in the case of emergency. Does the employer know who to contact? Do they have a phone number? Would they be willing to call Mexico or Guatemala if they had to? How would they do that? And so these kinds of discussions are important, again, from an overall perspective of not only an immigration detention, but if there's any kind of emergency. Unfortunately, we've seen different kinds of emergencies and found that the farm owner may not know who to contact other than their co-workers. And if a group of co-workers are in an accident together, that leaves them without anywhere to go. And so this is a critical piece to what we're doing. This theme of shortage of workers, the difficulty of finding skilled and reliable workers, the topic of local labor being available or not available or willing to work is a theme that was echoed throughout our interviews with the farmers. This is a very common theme all through the state, anywhere in the state, the sense that there are not local people who are willing to do the work that the immigrant workers are currently doing. So I think we'll go to the next slide and share a little bit of what are some of the things that we started out, I want to say, we started out with this as a broad all-commodity project, and then we started to focus a little bit more on dairy farms just to be more coherent in how we were approaching this. So, Janice, do you want to share a little bit of what some of the farm owners on dairy farms had to say?
Yes. If you look through the list, maintaining proper milking procedures, slippage and length of time for milking, so instead of taking 2.5 hours, maybe it's taken 3 hours or, whatever. The employer didn't feel like the employees were staying on task correctly. Starting milking on time, meeting milk quality targets, bedding and maintaining stalls, calf care, sick cow care, and moving down cows. So most of their concerns relate to performance, following procedures, meeting targets for performance, and things like that.
And there was another area that was much more subtle that we also collected data which was related to workers arriving on time, some more detailed issues. It seems that depending on the farm, they felt that workers were very good at, disposing of their gloves or keeping the milking parlor clean or not. But one of the things that we found that was very important in this research is that often on dairy farms, as well as fruit and vegetable farms, the employer may offer housing to their workers. So we typically found that co-workers were also housemates. And that brought up a whole number of concerns, which we'll talk about a little bit further down the line.
So can I ask a question while you're?
Yeah, sure.
So what I'm thinking about is I'm hearing about these things, and some of these are concerns that were brought up by employers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So were you also asking questions about their relationship, or so that's part of what you'll share a little bit later. Okay, seems like that might have something to do with it. All right, we're going to open up a poll here. Give me a second. All right, and this poll has two questions. The first part is, do you interact with Hispanic workers on your farm? And then the second part is, if you do, in what context do you interact? And I'm just going to give you if this works, all right, this is a short answer. The second part you can answer in text, and your name will be associated with your answer, so just forewarning you that when we look at the responses, it will have a name with it, so answer as you will. Okay, so go ahead and take part in the poll. We'll give you a couple minutes. It looks like there's I think there's 24 of you that are on right now, so we'll give you a couple minutes, and and consider if you have if you do interact with Hispanic workers, what you have to offer in the context part is really going to be helpful for the rest of us and for some discussions. So please do share. All right. Okay, a couple more of you maybe. So if you're just tuning in, we have a poll up right now asking how do you interact with Hispanic workers on farms and the work that you do within Cooperative Extension, and if your answer is yes, how do you interact? All right, I'm going to close the poll. And it gives you a couple minutes to finish up your responses if you're in the middle of one. 8 more seconds. All right, and then we're going to share the poll results and any of the written text. And here we are. Okay. So it looks like about 4% interact frequently, 9% interact sometimes, 17% interact occasionally, 43% interact never, and we had a few that didn't respond. And then here's some of the contextual responses. If you do, in what context do you interact? Enable communication between employer and employee. When on farms of CCE ag enrollees, usually asking for input or directing to somebody on the farm. Them to the farm for milking position and stayed for a little over a year and then moved on to another job with higher pay. As a byproduct of interacting with the farm owner, I may see the employees and chat with them a little. I am in discussion with the employers, often about their Hispanic and non-Hispanic labor forces, and informally is another answer. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So let's see, how do I go back to where we were? Oh goodness. All right, so if you want to respond to that a little bit, I'm going to take care of a little technical problem here.
This is just helpful information because it gives us a sense of, there are some, 43% of people who never interact with the workers themselves, some occasionally, sometimes, and frequently. So it just gives us a sense of who we're talking to, who's involved here. Because our next question for the poll is just to get a reading from folks about what concerns are among farm workers in your area, because the concerns also vary depending on where people live.
Okay, so this you're going to add into the chat box. What are concerns among farm workers in your area? And I think I was able to make some adjustments so that you can share with everyone instead of just to the panelists. But you might tell me something different. It's hard to know what you see on the other side of things here. So go ahead and respond a little bit on what concerns are in farm workers in your area. If you have some, you may be tuning in and just kind of want to know a little bit about this program, which is absolutely A-OK. But if you know about some concerns of farm workers in your area, please do share that in the chat box. Okay, communication of expectations. I'll read these out to you, Mary Jo, as they come through. Anything else? You might want to start just...
Well, I think that is certainly a critical piece, which is how the expectations are communicated in both directions, both from the farm owner or manager to the workers, and that's something that workers talk about, but also there's sometimes slippage in how these concerns are voiced back to the managers or owners. We want to make sure people have a chance to chime in here.
So here's some other things that have come through. Career ladder, being picked up by immigration, transportation to the farm, from the Hispanic workers to get enough hours in. They like to work as many hours as they possibly can. And for the farm workers from the local population, it is to have time off for their families when they need and want it.
Okay. All right. Okay, and just I think this reading is something that we have definitely found. The career ladder is this when people don't really have a good idea of what what opportunities there are for advancement. Maybe we'll go to the next slide and then we'll touch on some of these. So here are some of the workplace, and I want to emphasize that these are some of the workplace concerns, and there's a range of other concerns that are for outside of the workplace. So there seems to be a strong need for workers to have more clarity on what are the criteria for pay increases. Is it the time that they've been working? Are there performance criteria? If so, what are they? And through this process, it's been interesting because sometimes farm owners have very clear criteria, and sometimes they don't. Janice, do you want to chime in on that at all, or?
I would agree with what you just said, and I think that applies to the workforce on the farm in general. It's not specific to Hispanic workers as far as criteria for pay increases and regular performance reviews and that whole area of performance feedback.
Right. And the other issue is time off and scheduling, and this is particularly an issue on those dairy farms where the schedule changes every 2 weeks. So people have a sense that they don't know, they can't make plans for their time off if they don't know when their time off is going to be somewhat in advance. Very common that people have no idea what their training opportunities are or what are their opportunities for advancement. In particular, workers talk about learning how to drive the tractor. Can they transition, and I'll focus on dairy for a minute, can they transition from working in the milking parlor to working with calves or to working in some of the crops? And there are issues there related to immigration status for some of the workers. Housing is a topic that raises a lot of questions because, as I mentioned earlier, coworkers are often housemates. And we've been paying particular attention on those farms where there are not conflicts to understand what they are. And when people are related, they have their own way of dealing with each other in their house. So that's one approach that works well. When people are not related to each other, some farms have a strategy where they actually go to the housing and the workers know that the farmer is going to come every other Wednesday, and that seems to help some of the internal decision making. Some housing, it's like a fraternity. There are rules, and if you follow the rules, great, and if you don't follow the rules, there's nothing that they can actually do to get you out of the housing because the housing is part of the terms of employment. One of the things that we have developed based on some of the best practices is a housing checklist so that those who are overseeing the housing can be the farm owner, sometimes it's a manager, sometimes it's the wife of the farm owner, have sort of a guideline to look at. Here are some of the things that they might want to look at, and similarly that workers know what are the things that they can report and they should report to the farm owner. If the toilet's not working, if the microwave's broken, if there's water coming out of a pipe, and it's been really interesting to give them some sort of a tool. There's a lot of, because of the labor uncertainty, one of the practices that we've seen that's very common on dairy farms is when a worker is planning to leave, they feel responsible for training their replacement. And so there's this uncertainty of when they should tell the farm owner that they're actually going to leave. This often implies lining up someone from their town or a relative, having that person come to the farm, which may include crossing international borders, getting that person in place, introducing that person to the farm owner, and then having some training period. It is very, very typical that there is an expectation that those people who are working on the farm will train their replacement. On some farms, the farm owner gives them kind of a training bonus, a monetary bonus for training their replacement. On some farms, they give them a monetary bonus, which is kind of their accumulated vacation, but that is always unclear to workers how much that is. They know on such and such a farm, the farm owner gave them $500 for training their replacement, or they know on such and such a farm, the farmer gave them a bonus when they left. So there's a lot of, there's a lack of clarity there. And there's also an issue there where if you have an employee who does the job well and they are able to train their person well, that can work. But if the employee trains the next person to make the same mistakes that he or she made, then that's a problem. So we talked a lot. In this process, we've learned a lot and listened a lot to issues related to training. One of the big concerns among the workers is the future of the farm. Is this farm growing or is it going out of business? And the sense that they don't know. This is particularly important where we see the aging of farm owners, and so they can see that farmer so-and-so is getting older. Is he going to, sell the farm, and what's going to happen to me? Is he going to, we've seen lots of farms, joining other farms, neighboring farms for a variety of reasons. Is my boss going to be this other farmer, this neighbor farmer? Now am I going to work with these other workers who are from a different country? There's a lot of questions about that. We have some of the workers mentioned that they didn't feel comfortable asking for a tool, and part of that had to do with not wanting to be blamed if something didn't work, and so trying to get around it without saying something isn't working and that we need it fixed. Or there's also on some farms a lot of frustration with their sense that they communicated that something wasn't working and it just doesn't get fixed, or if there are supplies that would help them to do the job better. I think we're going to jump 2 slides ahead.
Okay, so before we jump, there's a picture here that includes you. So I asked Mary Jo to include a picture of herself, and she laughed at me. But I think it's important that, in building this Campus County connection, that we all kind of know who people are. But tell us what's happening in this picture. You're sitting down with a couple of gentlemen.
Well, as I mentioned, one of the things that we do first of all is because immigration is such a big concern, and because we're going on farms where we may or may not know the workers, we do an emergency planning workshop as a first step, just so they can get to know us, so that we can address some of the concerns that have been expressed to us. So right now we're sitting down. These are workers in Washington County, actually, and we're going over some of the information on the emergency planning workshop. And then later on, the next day, we met again to talk about workplace issues. So it's important to understand there are several phases of this. One is to make sure the workers kind of know who we are and invite them to be part of this project. Not everybody wants to be part of a project that looks at workplace relations and communication. And so if they don't, that's okay. I mean, we don't try to pressure them into being part of that. But it does take a lot of coordination to make sure that you find that little window of time when you can get 3, 4, 5, 6 workers together to do these activities. And we've had, we've had different levels of success, but it's been extremely helpful in those parts of the state where the county collaborators help us to set this up so that it's convenient for the workers and for the farm owners. And on busy farms, it's hard to find that window of time. So I want to go to 2 slides down because I think that's...
right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that we found is that it has been really important for people to have this opportunity not only to talk about their current job, but to talk about their experience as workers. So because the shortage of workers is a big concern throughout the state, we also collected information on why they left other positions in the past, but what are the factors that are not directly related to the workplace that affects your decision to leave in the past? This is a huge issue. I don't know. I hope there's still people on the webinar from the North Country. It's a huge issue in different parts of the state where workers feel that they cannot leave the farm without running the risk of being detained by local police, sheriff, state police, or immigration. This is a huge issue when agriculture depends on an unauthorized workforce. And because people are hesitant to leave the farm on a regular basis, it makes all the issues related to the farm critical, the housing in particular. If your life is working and then sleeping and spending some limited time in your house, how that housing is really important. Is it comfortable? Do you have good communication with your housemates? Can you cook? That's a big issue. The other thing is just that degree of support from their employer for achieving their basic needs. In particular, there are farms where the practice is every 2 weeks. Usually it's the farmer's wife or a neighbor or someone will take people to town. And that trip to town includes grocery shopping, buying anything they might need for personal needs. Often it includes takeout food, but that is their interaction with the local community. So this question that was raised earlier about interaction with local communities, for many of the workers, their interaction with the local community, when we ask them about that, is the cashiers at the Walmart superstore or Aldi's. So their interactions with people in the community are extremely limited. Their ability to make that happen without running the risk of being detained is critical. Some farms, there are people who are friends of the farm, sometimes unemployed, underemployed, retired people who help to give rides to town. But for those people who are unauthorized, they cannot drive, they shouldn't drive. So it creates a situation where there's a dependence on, usually it's the farm owner to help them navigate that or their coworkers to help them to navigate that. And so one of the other factors is how far it is to town. What is the distance to where they can buy their groceries, get whatever personal items they need. And another big issue is their proximity to family members. One of the things that we see often, and Janice, you can chime in, we see a group of workers who move from farm to farm in a setting where there might be 6 farms that are relatively close to each other. And so you are on a farm one day and the workers are different, and then you go to another farm, which is a neighboring farm, and there's the other workers. And we talk a lot about this with the workers is, so why did you move from this place to this place? And it usually has to do with housemates. It has to do with being close to relatives. It has to do with the non-work associated life. And so that's something that I think sometimes for farm managers it can be frustrating for them that, they notice that, oh, now it is, Julio who is here and it's not Juan who was here yesterday. And of course, the situation varies in different parts of the state, but that is something that does take place. One of the other things which I think has been useful is to understand what people's plan is. How long are they planning to be here, and why do they leave? Because the sense of constant fluctuation within the workforce is a source of stress for employers, but it's also a source of stress for co-workers. And in our research, we found that people typically plan to come for 3 years, but their plan is to return. Often they stay longer than 3 years, and so we in our farm worker needs assessment, we ask questions about what were the intervening factors, what affected your decision. But there seems to be a point where they're done. And one of the things which has changed over the past few months is that there was high expectation that there would be an immigration reform that would affect farm workers and allow them to be working here legally and allow them the option to return home for short periods of time. And when that fell apart, there was a decrease in the morale among the workers, and for many workers, they said, I'm just leaving. I've waited for immigration reform, I'm leaving. And so we've seen this recently on a lot of the farms that are involved in this project.
Along with that, Mary Jo, I think there's less coming and going than there used to be because it's so much more difficult to get across the border. So,
right.
As you said, people are staying longer, and then when they leave, they leave. They're usually working towards some goal at home, building a house or, improving the family's living standard, and then when they reach that, they go back.
And so one of the things which I think sometimes some farm owners understand it very well and others understand it less well is these relationships between the different workers. Are they friends? Are they relatives? Do they get along? Do they not like each other? And that's probably the hardest thing to plan, except for that factor that people recruit their replacement. So when on those farms where they recruit their replacement, they try to find somebody they think would get along with the other ones. There are many, many factors that affect this labor stability and instability. Probably immigration is the biggest factor. On some farms, we've had family members, people who are related, who have worked and established themselves in the community in some ways, or interacted with the community in some ways, who have been targeted by immigration. Most of the off-farm interactions are workers' participation in soccer leagues and religious organizations, attending religious services.
I'm going to jump in. It looks like it's 10:15, and we're right before we start to wrap things up. I just want to ask both of you to talk a little bit about, with this program, if there's an association out there that might be listening that thinks that they could benefit from the resources that you have or some of the ideas that you shared, how would they get involved?
Well, we would strongly urge anybody who's interested in thinking about collaborating on this to contact us. The contact information is here. And not just dairy. I want to emphasize that, as I was mentioning to Celeste, we just are finishing a grant proposal to develop some training modules for grape pruning, for raspberry pruning. It's not just dairy. This has been kind of one of the areas where we focus due to trying to concentrate our resources in a collective way. But I did want to throw that out. And I think since we know that some percentage of folks here haven't interacted much with farm workers, it's an opportunity for you to invite us to do the emergency planning workshop or one of our other workshops, and it would give you an entree to understanding what are concerns among workers in the area. Mm-hmm. We do a farm worker needs assessment where we actually sit down with individual workers and talk and ask them about everything from where they're from, what it was like growing up there, why did they leave home, how did they get here, what do they like about what they're working, what don't they like, and what is their vision for the future. So kind of that gives us a good way of understanding what workers are thinking. And just quickly, the third part of this project is facilitating these joint worker-employer consultations.
Okay. So, and Janice, do you want to add like a field perspective to some of that, opportunities to work together with the Cornell Farm Worker Program? Are you out there, Janice?
No, I'm here. I'm just
on the spot. I'm sorry.
I'm thinking about how to respond to that.
Okay.
I mean, it's a great way to bring maybe a higher level of service outreach to the employers that maybe we couldn't do alone in the association, and help address some of the worker-employer needs. So that's a huge benefit.
All right. Great. I didn't mean to jump in. I just wanted to make sure that we covered that, and definitely wanted to leave time for some questions. So you may have, do you want to go back to any of the slides that we jumped over?
Well, I think maybe go back to the question, which is, and Janice, you can speak to this because you've been involved in this. What is the advantage of having us do one of the emergency planning workshops for workers in the area, and how does that affect workers in areas of heavy immigration detention?
Well, I would say my area is not really a heavy detention area. I mean, if they have a run-in with the law through some kind of traffic violation, then it's a different story, but I don't think there's active seeking out of, workers in this area. But in terms of the emergency training, I think, as with any emergency planning, it gives people a chance to think about something before they're in the situation, and they have some options at their fingertips on how best to respond. So I think that is very valuable. And also, if the employers participate, they understand better and can advise their workers or provide them with resources so that they can respond appropriately.
So one of the questions was, how can people keep the labor they have? And if you go back one slide, Celeste, I think one of the things that we found is facilitating better workplace communication. And that's not just, back another one, not just, not just the Spanish-English piece, but it's really how do we have a conversation in which there's a conversation, an employer-employee conversation where they talk about their communication, their relationships, the reward system for job performance, simple things like explaining the paycheck. What's the pay stub look like? And what are these deductions is important. Explaining what the health facilities are in the area. What are creating the housing maintenance checklist. Having this joint conversation, I think, has been very fruitful because it creates an opportunity, a time for people to talk about issues, but it is also an opportunity to share some of the wonderful practices that we've seen on other farms, on different farms. So we hope to do more of this, and we would welcome collaborations with other folks in other parts of the state, and hopefully we can bring you into this process so that you feel like you can be an ongoing advocate for helping to create positive workplaces throughout the state.
So it looks like 3 questions have come in while we're talking, and I'm going to read them all. So and then while you're considering it, I'll bring up your website. Okay. So here's the questions. Would it be possible to get a list of different workshop topics that you would be willing to offer that we could present to our farmers?
Yes, absolutely.
Could you share with us how to find the housing checklist that you mentioned? I'm assuming, is that on your website?
We can send that to you.
Okay. And how do you sell the program to the producers? I think this program would be a great way to work with some larger scale producers who don't utilize extension. But how do you go about convincing the producer of the benefits of the program?
Well, that's an excellent question.
And it is a true hurdle sometimes because it's a pretty huge time commitment for the 3 phases of the program.
Yeah, and it's time, and time, in this case, time is money, but if the producer has a sense that it will help to decrease some of these other stressors, it will help to decrease, you know, people leaving their farm and increase this positive workplace, I think that that has been invaluable for the people who've been involved so far. To some of the producers who've been involved, they just want to know what's going on in people's heads, and they know that if they, as a farm owner or from their position as employer, go to their workers and try to get a sense of that, they won't get a genuine sense of what's going on. For people who live in areas where immigration detentions are a big issue, to actually have the conversation with workers and with employers, I think is helpful, because we try to give them a place to go. What would you do if? And I think that's a great relief for folks.
All right.
I don't know, did I answer that question?
We'll let somebody chat in if you have any follow-ups to that. But meanwhile, another question came in, and I have your website up that they are also looking at. So if you want to point something out on here, we can do that. And the other question that came in was, well, there's 2 of them now. How do you find the number of these workers in our county? And does your office communicate what it has learned to local, state, and federal legislators?
Yes, we just actually completed, let me answer the second one first. We just completed a study for the Finger Lakes Economic Development Council, and it was a very short-term study looking at, we've heard a lot about the potential for the yogurt boom, but there hasn't been anything that kind of looks at where are you going to get the workers to increase milk production, or if you're worried about instability of your workforce, how can you commit to the levels of milk production that you currently have? So we did a research project, and we shared that with the Finger Lakes Economic Development Council. It was a very small research project. It received some funding from the Department of State Office of New Americans, and they are posting the report on their website, and we've tried to share that with policymakers through different formats. I think it's always a challenge. We are a program that is constantly writing proposals to cover our expenses, so that we try to do what we can. But we'd be happy if there are people out there in the associations who want to take the report and do something with it with your local legislators. That would be great, too. Or set up a meeting, and that would be great, too. We've done some meetings with folks which have been very, very productive. I find that they are very productive when we have someone from the county association in the meeting with someone from campus, because it really makes that connection, and it creates the connections that we want for the long haul.
Well, that's a great wrap-up statement right there, right? We're coming close to the close of our hour here, and so is there anything on your website that you would point people to?
I guess my one thing is that our website hasn't been updated. Cornell is going through the process of updating websites, and ours is not there yet. So I would suggest that you check in another month. But there is something on our website that I want to bring people's attention to. Because we have a large number of workers in the state from Mexico and Guatemala, we've also been working with the consulates to have them come to the upstate area to have a mobile consulate where they actually can help people get their documents from their home country that many workers don't have, a passport or a federally issued ID. The other big issue that I want to mention to folks is we have a strong collaboration with the law school here at Cornell, a project where we're helping those people who might be working on farms who came before the age of 16. over a year ago, President Obama issued a program, it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivees, a program which would allow someone who came before the age of 16 to the U.S. without documents to get a 2-year work permit, a Social Security number that would allow them to apply for a license. There are some people on farms, and I just want to bring that to folks' attention, that if you think that there are workers on farms, if you can help us identify them, this has been a wonderful opportunity for some of the people who came here at a very young age.
It looks like there's some great resources here that people might want to tap into as well.
Yeah, I think we have a PowerPoint on driving in New York State for people who are driving. We have some information on chemical safety on dairy farms. We're kind of always updating this, although I do want to say that we went into the website the other day and realized that some of the links are broken. So if there's something that you're looking for and it's not there, if you can send an email to farmworkers@cornell.edu, we'll try to respond to that. In particular, any of the things that we talked about. We are putting together a guide, which we hope to have in the spring, that will have some of these tools that we talked about, the housing checklist, a visual explanation of what might appear on people's paychecks. So stay tuned for that. It's not on our website right now, but it will be when we finish it.
Okay. All right. It looks like we're about ready to wrap up here.
One last thing, Celeste. We do have a summer internship program, and we have placed students with county associations. So if it's helpful to have someone who speaks Spanish and English, who's from your county, who might be able to help you to find that niche that you can play, familiarize yourself with farm workers in the area, keep that in mind. That's on our website. But we found it's been really helpful that the county associations may know of a young person who lives in who studies at Cornell, would be interested in coming home for the summer, speaks Spanish, and so those are kind of the best situations we find.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Jo and Janice, for joining us today, and thank you to all of you who tuned in for this Campus County Connection webinar. Coming up, there's a variety of webinars that most of them are focused on some projects that have some federal funding, federal formula funds that combine research and extension. So take a look. You can register for any or all of these if you go to the registration site on the Cooperative Extension staff page, staff.cce.cornell.edu. And you don't need to be registered to attend. As I typically will say in an email, grab a cup of coffee and a colleague and sit around, and it'll give you something to chew on and talk about afterwards as you consider some opportunities for your association. So thanks again.
Thank you, Celeste.